Welcome to my channel Vintage Glam. I'm your host Yvonne. In today's episode, I'll be talking about Grace Mirabella, Vogue's often overlooked editor-in-chief. In 1971, Condé Nast stunned the fashion world by ousting the legendary Diana Vreeland. In her place, the company appointed her quiet, pragmatic assistant, Grace Mirabella. Industry insiders were appalled, many dismissing Grace outright as a fashion dud. Gianni Bulgari of Bulgari Jewels called it the vulgarization of Vogue. Andy Warhol quipped that the magazine wanted to go middle class. Even one of Mirabella's own colleagues dismissed her to Newsweek as a 9-to-5 girl. Few expected her to last, but Mirabella's critics were missing the bigger picture. Times were changing, and so were women. Grace Mirabella understood this cultural shift intimately, and in many ways, her entire career had prepared her for this moment. Until Grace's appointment, Vogue editors had largely hailed from the same moneyed and well-born circles as its target audience. Grace was from a different world altogether. Born June 10, 1929, to immigrant Italian parents, Grace was raised in middle-class suburban New Jersey. When her father, Anthony Bellafato, a drinker and a gambler, died unexpectedly, her mother, Florence Bellafato, took a job in a clothing store and worked tirelessly to put Grace through Skidmore College. Upon graduation, Grace joined Macy's executive training program in merchandising. She quickly moved from Macy's to Saks Fifth Avenue, where she was hired as an assistant to the sales promotion director overseeing advertising. But she had little interest in secretarial work. Recognizing this, her boss referred her to a contact at Vogue. Grace was hired to work at Vogue while Jessica Daves was editor-in-chief. Soon after, Vogue's famed fashion editor, Bettina Ballard, helped Grace land a job in Rome, working with the designers Simonetta and Fabiani. At the time, Rome was a city buzzing with post-war energy. Fashion was intimate, artisanal, and deeply rooted in culture. Italian designers were dressing real women with elegance and practicality. Grace adapted to the pace of Rome. She learned to speak Italian fluently and became a bridge between American publishing and European couture. She forged close relationships with manufacturers, suppliers, and designers, earning their trust and establishing herself as a capable, discerning tastemaker. In an era when few American women held that kind of influence abroad, Grace's presence in Rome was quietly groundbreaking. In 1955, Grace returned from Rome and she rejoined Vogue. She was what they called the magazine's shophound, a junior role that involved sniffing out what was chic and novel in the shops of New York. It was Grace's job to know what was new before anyone else did. As the 1960s dawned, Jessica Daves, with her polished restraint and practical elegance, quietly fell out of favor. Replacing her as editor-in-chief was Diana Vreeland, theatrical and visionary. With Diana's arrival, Vogue entered an era of fantasy. Grace admired Diana's brilliance, but instinctively knew her own sensibility was the opposite. When Diana asked Grace to pull together some clothing for a fashion editorial, Grace delivered what she knew best, a tightly edited selection grounded in what was available in stores. Diana was disappointed. She wasn't looking for a market report. She was looking for a dream. Feeling out of place with Vogue's new direction, Grace put out feelers for a new job. But Diana, perceptive in her own way, saw something valuable in Grace: order, clarity, and discipline. She offered Grace a new title, assistant editor, a critical role in helping Diana get the bi-monthly magazine out on time. Diana often relied on Grace to translate her visionary ideas to the staff. This combination produced some of the most striking editorials in Vogue's history. By 1971, Vreeland was finding herself out of step with the times. She was approaching 70 years old and had refused to engage with the emerging new woman who wanted wearable fashions for work. Diana was abruptly dismissed and Grace Mirabella was named as her replacement. Fashion insiders felt that Grace's appointment was threatening to turn Vogue into the Sears catalog. Grace was aware that there were doubts and concerns about her position as editor-in-chief, but she had a larger vision. Grace wanted to transform Vogue's direction from fashion fantasy to an image of heightened reality. She wanted to give Vogue back to women by showing women doing things that mattered in their lives and wearing clothes that they enjoyed. Grace featured clothes in her editorials that would take women from work to cocktails to dinner and home. She featured the new class of designers catering to these women: Halston, Jeffrey Bean, Bill Blass, and Ungaro. Grace also changed the look of the cover lines into ones that invited the reader to look at the stories about fashion and beauty. Her go-to photographers were now Arthur Elgort, Francesco Scavullo, and Deborah Tuberville. Grace chose models that had wide eyes and bright smiles, like Lauren Hutton, Renee Russo, and Roseanne Vela. All of this worked. Circulation numbers and advertising revenue was up. Grace was living in a Park Avenue apartment. She bought it with an interest-free loan from Condé Nast. By the early 1980s, culture started to shift again, moving toward money-grubbing and glitz, and fashion started to reflect this as well. A new aristocracy of traders and bankers from Wall Street became popular. Christian Lacroix's creations became the hottest ticket in town. Ball gowns, bouffant skirts, and embroidered jackets became the new style. Grace sensed that Lacroix's popularity was part of a larger cultural shift that she was disgusted by. In 1986, a trendy young upstart, Elle Magazine, came upon the scene. The bosses at Vogue started to panic about its fluctuating circulation number and ad revenues. Elle's were quickly rising, and it made its fashion points by being trendy and cartoon-like. Grace defended Vogue by keeping firm in what she was doing, ignoring the higher-ups' requests to make Vogue younger. The bosses at Vogue began to make editorial decisions without her. In June 1988, a new young editor named Anna Wintour was named editor-in-chief at Vogue, and Grace Mirabella was out. After her abrupt departure from Vogue, Miss Mirabella announced plans to launch a publication of her own. Backed by media mogul Rupert Murdoch, Mirabella magazine debuted in May 1989. In her inaugural editor's letter, she made clear that this was not simply a fashion magazine. It would be much more than clothes or interior design. She left the magazine in 1996 and began to focus on lecturing and freelance writing. Without her guiding hand, Mirabella struggled to maintain a consistent editorial identity and quietly shuttered in April 2000. I think every editor of Vogue is a living embodiment of the era they are working in, and Grace was certainly that. Grace was an intelligent woman who had grown up, gone to work, and charted her own path outside of a traditional mold. With her time as assistant editor with Diana Vreeland and her work as editor-in-chief at Vogue, Grace Mirabella was part of some of the greatest moments in fashion history. Grace passed away in 2021 at the age of 92. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.